Welcome to the Coastal Hazards meeting for the 5th of July 2024, and we'd like to start with a karakia.
O te rei akuranga tira morena koutou tēnā koutou katoa. I will lead us in our karakia this morning, one that I'm sure we're all quite familiar with. So, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei maurura.
Kia ora. But a quick housekeeping. Toilets for our guests are just down the hall and to the right. If we have a large earthquake, we're going to stop, drop, cover and hold and make your way as fast as you can up the hill. And I think we all know the drill here in Napier. A call for apologies. I have one from Councillor Price and Annette Brosnan. And one from Jerif, the chair, hence I'm in the chair.
I'm not a member, Chair. I just think Chris Dolly can't be here either, but he'll join the workshop later.
Brilliant.
An apology from Tanya Kerr and Hannah's here.
Yes. Right, and as part of the warm-up, we'd like to invite Hannah Montepoto Hendry to the committee. Hannah hasn't been officially appointed yet. She's come in the the latest by-election for Hastings District Council. She's the ward member there, so likely to be on this committee, but it hasn't been made official yet. So everyone, welcome to Hannah. And right, just a call for any minor matters to add to the agenda.
Just one from me, Chair, acknowledging the weather events of 25th and 26th of June. Zhao was here from HPRC with a few photos to show and a bit of commentary on the event. An official report will come, but we thought for today it'd be useful to run through just some of those impacts so the Joint Committee are aware of them. So if there's space for that in the agenda.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and to acknowledge that this is a very live issue. So yeah, we'll fit that in at the end. And then just a note from myself. Just want to say that it's quite regrettable. We had a engagement with Mana Whenua scheduled for the 4th of July, so a couple of days ago at Matahiwi Marae. And unfortunately, we had to postpone due to confusion within the community about weather events and what the meeting was. So we very much looking forward to having that meeting and looking to reschedule as soon as possible. Okay. Do we have any conflicts of interest today? There being none. Can I ask for a confirmation of the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Dixon. Any discussion? No. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, our first substantive paper for this morning is Tauranga erosion issues. Do you want to lead us in that one, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Can I invite Zhao up to speak to this item? He was the author of the report, so he's best placed to speak to it, but largely as Zhao makes his way up, do you want to come up to the table? This is a direct response to the Joint Committee's request for some analysis from TAG on the proposal from the Tiamonga community for the eco-reef proposal and how that might fit with the strategy. So I hand to Zhao to take us through the paper.
Thanks.
Do I need to? Oh yeah.
While you're plugging in, just welcome to Councillor Lambert online there. Let's see.
Do I have to attend to the meeting online as well to share the screen?
While you're loading up, Zhao, can I clarify we're speaking to the paper first and then the photos and presentation will come later?
The eco
Okay, so the paper is the paper on the eco reef.
That's right, correct, yeah.
Right. I can talk about the presentation first and then go to the paper. What works best for you?
I'll be guided by the chair. I mean, I think order of play was we're going to do the presentation last, but either or.
6, 1, half a dozen there. But if you're ready with your presentation, you can do that first,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Presentation ready, by the way. Yes, I can do that.
Are you ready to go for the paper?
Paper is quite, not really, but the thing about the paper is that we basically listed what we intend to do to analyze the eco-reef proposal, how we can match that to the coastal strategy and the analysis that we intend to do moving forward. Yeah, it's quite a high level paper on that. And basically, this is what it says. Like we will be analyzing that together with eco-reef and trying to fit that to the strategy and seeing whether we can do that.
Okay, I'll address that now. Does anyone from the committee have any questions on the eco-reef paper? No? Any discussion?
I'll go for the question. I'm just trying to understand. I've read the paper, but this is just essentially a once-over lightly first look at the potential impacts.
Yes.
What's the process? How was this rolled out? What's the analysis, the detailed analysis to go there? What's that process, timeline, and how does it relate to the consultation that we're looking at doing?
We don't have a timeline just yet, but the process would be basically how the logistics would work. For example, like if we're doing the nourishment, how can we do the renourishment with that wall in place without either damaging the wall, or how can we put the machinery there? Then other things that we would be looking at would be the flood protection that it should provide as well, because the flood protection that Jose did back in the day was for a 50-year event at Haumoana, and that was validated with kind of state-of-the-art models, whereas the eco-reef, thank you, sorry, whereas the eco-reef, until now, I have been in touch with them, and they haven't provided us with any sort of say objective or at least model tested structure, where he could say, okay, 2-meter structure will do the job of a 5-meter gravel bund. So we don't have that, some sort of rule of thumb. And then other issues regarding to scouring, if we would have scouring on the edge of the structure, or how can we attach the gravel bund to the structure, then again, without causing breaching or even damaging the structure. This is more or less what we'll be looking at on a high level.
Okay. But you don't have a time frame for doing that at the moment.
Well, I would be working with that right now if there wasn't this event.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that yet.
Thank you.
Can I just add a little bit more to that if I can through the chair? So I think the other thing to note in the paper is that Hastings have agreed, and I think you can speak to this more, Malcolm, and others, but have agreed to fund the first stage of this, and are looking to progress that through consenting. So we're in a bit of a, as I understand it, a bit of a grey zone where at the moment HBRC is really the regulator for the purposes of this structure, right? So that process will commence. It'll be assessed as a regulator and an applicant as per any other project on the coastline. At some point, there'll be a merging of, as per other structures on the coastline, a merging of that response and the strategy. So it's a tricky one in terms of lining all that up. What we're suggesting is that HBRC's role is primarily regulatory for now, but through that process we'll learn a bit more about things like the scouring and other bits and pieces. And I suppose then how they might mesh together. What the paper does say right now is that from the first run through of the analysis, there appears to be good alignment on the basis that the eco-reef structure is gravel filled anyway, so it's not like you're swapping out something that's completely contradictory that could work together. And perhaps analysis might show that with a hard core sort of structure to the bund, perhaps this nourishment might be required. So that's the sort of stuff we'll be looking at over time, but for now it's Hastings progressing as the applicant, HBRC as a regulator at this stage, and in future there will be a review around how the strategy might fit together. I think one of the more complicating factors for HBRC to consider in the next phase, as it considers consultation, is how does it look at the costs of potentially two solutions and how might they complement. So there's more work to do on aligning that a bit more, but for now the paper suggesting there appears to be at least a complementary proposal in front of us at the moment, if that helps.
Councillor Corbyn?
Thank you. So where does this sit with the memorandum of transition?
It's a great question. So that memorandum requires that, well, there's two steps, right? So the interim response plan right now sets out how we deal with more urgent coastal matters, and that basically says the TAs progress things as required. So that's what's happening. Then the memorandum requires that for any assets that might transfer in future, there needs to be a consultation process between the TA and HBRC. So I would expect that as this proposal becomes more concrete, excusing the pun I suppose, Hastings would consult with HBRC on the proposal, just as Napier did on the Whakareria revetment, which is recently constructed. So that consultation should be kicking off reasonably soon, I would have thought.
Yes, thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Dixon?
The 25th of June shows this particular area had some real urgency around it.
Yeah.
And that's the major move why Hastings is actually trying to do this. So we need an urgent time frame. We don't need this to be dragged out whatsoever. So can you give us a clue? Will it be September, October, or are you going to go into 2025?
No way, just 2025. We'll be working together, like next week I'll be going to Tiawanga and talking to Fred from Eco Reef, and I'll be working with him also, especially with the modeling of the inundation. But say September, October, something like that, I can, yeah. Can work
And Simon, your summary is correct, so thank you for that.
Thanks, Councillor. And I think just to add to that, again, I think for me the pace will be driven largely by Hastings at this stage, right? Because preparing for a consent application, a lot of work goes into that. Once HBRC receives the application, then the usual process will kick off. What Zhao's looking at is a little bit to the side of that, right? Like Zhao's work won't hold up the proposal because he's looking at how the strategy might align. That's distinct from the regulatory approvals process.
I have a question about the comms and how we're dealing with this. So I think this is great. This is the first sort of time that we're having to work out how this is an adaptive pathway and how we might change. And I think it's just brilliant and overall that the communities come forward with some ideas and that HDC are being really enabling and supporting the community through that. Wondering how we, if we have communication back still with our panels and whether there's a route for us to share essentially a good news story or a new technology with our other existing panels. Do we have like a newsletter?
We certainly have a newsletter which goes out after every other joint committee, so we could certainly communicate that. I mean, at the moment, like I say, it's a Hastings-led initiative, but we can certainly communicate what's happening there. Were you intending sort of more direct engagement with the formal panel members, or what's your thinking around the purpose of that extra discussion?
I suppose it sounds like on the surface quite a cool technology that could have other applications up the coast. Right. And I suppose just a continuing awareness within the other panel members around like latest technologies, because it's been a while since the original strategy was put together.
We can certainly make sure there's a newsletter been drafted, which is ready to go after this joint committee, so we can make sure that's captured and start the conversation that way.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, more a question, actually. Sort of the report simply asks us to receive and note the report. The report says that there were two options in the panel discussions and the outcomes of the panel discussions, and then it throws in the eco reef as an option as well. So it's actually saying there's now three options without any proper options analysis presented to us. An age-old question. Really, the purpose of our discussion here is probably about the process going forward, because we've got a report that says there's an option C and an option D2, and there's now an eco reef. And so I think what we've got to look at is what is the options analysis of how these issues, rather than, because we've now got also a statement in here that HDC has confirmed funding for the eco reef. But the eco reef wasn't originally part of the options analysis. So we've got to be really careful here about how the strategy will be rolled out up the coastline if suddenly we discover, oh, there's another difference or another storm surge has now affected another part of the beach line. And we've got to be pretty certain about, is our strategy and the options that have been presented as part of the community consultation processes robust enough to go forward? Or is it going to be up to the newest innovation is going to be the option chosen? So I think we've got to be really careful here about where our strategy and the work that's been done around hazard, the analysis, the consequences of works, and how those things are going to be rolled out. So I think while this report is simply, we're simply receiving a report for information, it doesn't actually help us with how the strategy is going to be applied in the future. And I think that's what we have to be careful about here. It's either a report that's going to give us an options analysis, or we're just simply receiving the report and it's up to other people to determine which option is best for them.
So, yeah, thank you. Through the chair, so there's a few things I'll try and touch on. So the first is, I think the strategy still only has one broad option for Te Awanga. The C2, D2 variants are just variations on how you might do that, right? So the C2 has one groin, more nourishment. D2 has more groins, less nourishment. So same outcome, but different method of getting there and different capital operational requirements. As to how that final option is selected, that's very much engineering design / financial analysis, environmental effects. There's a process to come to kind of fine-tune exactly how that final option will look once we're into implementation down the line. So from a strategy perspective, there is still a preferred option, which is the groins and nourishment. What's happened in the intervening period, as you note, is the eco reef proposals come up from the community. This is very similar, at least in my view, to what's happened at Cape View Corner, to what's happened at Clifton, and to what's happened at Whakariri Avenue, all of which are new interventions to respond to urgent coastal matters while the strategy trundles along and gets to a point where it becomes active. So to me, that's always been the intent of the strategy, is that it's a long-term, 100-year plus view. It's meant to be strategic and high level. It was always the intention that it wouldn't hold up urgent matters from progressing in the meantime, but it did seek that where that did happen, there was a complementarity or a synergy check to make sure that whatever's done in the meantime doesn't run counter to the strategy itself. So the paper is that test. The paper is intended to say, should this work proceed? Does that contradict the strategy? And what Zhao's analysis is showing is that it doesn't appear to. There was not enough time to do a full analysis in terms of should the strategy take a different approach. That's a much bigger question. That would require going right back to the panels and going, well, you had 10 options, you did all this analysis, should that be reconsidered? That process will need to happen in future anyway, but at this stage we haven't got the information available to really do that full analysis on whether we should change, but that can happen and should happen over time. So I think it's a long-winded answer, but I would just say that the paper's intent was to check, does this proposal as an urgent response run counter to the strategy? The answer is no, based on current analysis. It seems to align okay. And Hastings will progress that as per other urgent works in the interim. The strategy's job longer term is, what does a long-term view look like beyond just the next 10, 15, 20 years?
And Councillor Simpson, your question around should it just be purely a recommendation, if Giles' analysis came back and said that it was counter to the strategy, I would expect that there would be a recommendation around something that we should do in an advocacy type space. But seen as it's in line with the strategy and the work that's going on, and we don't really have much control over the work, are you happy that it stays as just a recommendation to receive the report, or is there something
Well,
I
that's all
should
we're
like?
being asked to do is receive the report.
Yeah, but, well, we get to decide what we decide though, right? So we can make another recommendation or move a different motion if we want to. But seen as there's only, that it's all in line and there's nothing necessarily for us to do that I can see, or is there something you can see that we should be doing?
As I say, it's just that question of, does that alter the paradigm for the strategy? The answer is no.
Yeah.
So that's the answer I was asking. Yep.
Yeah.
Or seeking. Yep.
Yeah, perfect, okay. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Thank you. Can I have a mover for the paper? Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Second from a different council. Thank you, Councillor Harding. Would either of you like to speak to the paper?
No, I'll just pick up on what Simon was saying. This work has to go ahead. There's an urgent issue that needs addressing. It's an intervention. It's not a replacement of the strategy, and it's important that whatever happens aligns with the strategy.
Right, just to support what Councillor Brown as chair, the comments that you made about this being a good test of the flexibility of the strategy. So that is good in itself. Just make a general observation, whilst it makes things slightly awkward in terms of the proposals that we've got that we're looking to consult on for Hum 1 or Tier 1, and it introduces some more uncertainty. From a big picture point of view, the kind of order of magnitude of costs and cost sharing, that major question that we're putting to the community is almost untouched. This is not going to change it by an order of magnitude. The big questions are, is there community support for going ahead and doing these interventions over time in the order of magnitude of where costs might lie. So that question is pretty robust still. So I don't have any problem about going into I don't see it as a showstopper from a consultation point of view. It doesn't really change the question. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it just shows that we're open to new technologies. Yes, we've done lots of work, but we're not going to be beholden to the path that we're on just because we're on a path. So brilliant. Any other speakers? With that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right. Second paper is the project manager's update. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll run through this briefly and then welcome questions. So in terms of the dashboard, there's no changes to report. Just noting that the timeframe remains the key risk, with funding and Mātauranga Māori noted as sort of key stress points at the moment, but work is progressing on both of those. In terms of other general updates, there's two to note. The first starts at paragraph 4 around HBRC's strategy consultation timing update. This has come back recently from HBRC to say that given a range of matters on their books, particularly a really tricky long-term plan process or 3-year financial plan process, they're looking to consult on the strategy in March next year rather than the October timeframe that we were anticipating. That doesn't change the work of this committee in the sense that really what we're doing is creating more space for HBRC to work through its process and create space from that long-term plan deliberations and adoption process. So this joint committee's program is unchanged, but there's a bit more time in there for HBRC. We are working through still as TAG how that impacts things like early engagement and consultation and how we can line that up. At paragraph 7, I've put a draft program of how that might look, with early engagement happening in October, November, and consultation in March. That's kind of the draft at this stage. Still being refined, and we'll discuss it more with HBRC at the next meeting at the end of this month.
Might just stop you there.
Sure.
Is there any questions on that part of the update?
Yeah, thank you, Simon, for that. I'm concerned that once again, we've pushed the time frame out. I don't know how many times that's happened. Can we just say that March is the last time? We're not going to push it out again? Can we put a line in the sand?
Well, through the chair, I think you could make that advice to HBRC, I suppose. All I'd say in response is HBRC's role now is to take this forward right as the lead agency. They've worked out in terms of where their books are sitting, where their activity is sitting. This is the best spot for them. But I would add to your comments, I think there is a risk if we keep delaying, right at some point we're going to lose the goodwill, I suppose, of where we're going from. I'm also mindful that next year are local body elections, right? So we'll run into further possible change. So from a TAG's perspective, it's March is what we're shooting for very firmly, but ultimately HPRC will make that call about when they consult on what will be their strategy. But certainly welcome comments from HPRC councillors on that point.
Councillor Harding,
Kia ora,
you're in the hot seat.
I'm the only one here today. Oh, no. Charlie, would you like to
Fine.
call me? No, look, what I'll say is that it was always going to be a challenging timetable for us as the council to sequence the range of consultations that we have to have. We, as a result of our long-term planning process, coming on the back of a revenue and financing consultation, we've got some work to do there. It's critical that we sequence consultations in an effective manner. Also, our staff have to have the capacity, the time to do the work. And as I say, pre-LTP, that was already challenging. Now, with the latest flooding in Wairoa, all of our efforts at the moment and the staff efforts are focused on doing whatever we can to support Wairoa. So that just simply has to come first.
So, Chair, can we put it down as an action?
What would you like the action to be?
The action to be that the consultation with the community actually starts in March 2025.
My concern around that, is it our consultation or is it HBRC's consultation?
Yeah, so through the chair, it's HBRC's consultation process.
Well, we recommend to HBRC that their consultation starts in March 2025.
Yeah. I suppose we could.
There's no hurry, Chair and Councillor Dixon, in reinforcing that with some sort of heartfelt comments from this committee about the urgency and the importance of not continuing to delay. There's absolutely no harm in saying that.
That's the key.
Yeah.
So the recommendation before us is just to receive the report. You'd like an action item to go on the project managers?
Could I suggest that this committee is going to make a recommendation to HBRC? Yeah? Mm-hmm. As part of that recommendation, it could be that consultation isn't delayed past March 2025 for the following reasons.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we take that as an action item.
Would you like to, through the chair, run through those reasons and I can scribble them down? Or would you like me just to write some up?
Well, you were coming up with some good ones, Simon.
I think I've heard them all. I think it's around community responsiveness, it's around the time to get to this point, it's around the delays we've had so far, all those key reasons you've mentioned.
And the number of times it's been pushed out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I can write those up, sure.
Okay. Brilliant.
Thank you, Chair. Just one last item I'll just speak to really briefly, which is just the further submission on the latest climate inquiry has been lodged on your behalf, as attached to the paper, and thank you to the Deputy Chair and Chair for the review of that. We'll keep you posted on any opportunity to talk to that submission, which we've asked to do. So hopefully you'll go better than the last select committee presentation where our Zoom link dropped out, and we'll have a better discussion with government on our thoughts on their inquiry.
And thank you for that. It was a really well-written submission. Any questions on the submission? Any general questions on the rest of the paper? Right, I'll ask for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Dixon, second by Councillor Simpson. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And the next paper is the current coastal projects update.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I think we can take this one as read. There's not a lot to update. We are missing a few key staff today with the Wairoa event to help with reporting anyway, but if there are questions, we're happy to answer them as best we can.
Does anyone have any questions?
Just a question around the Maria Tota River mouth. When is that going to be, how often is that cleared and how regular should it be cleared?
It's a fine question, thank you, Councillor. Is there anyone in the room that can help with that, Jonathan or Mark or Joel? I mean, if not, Chris Dolly would be the best one to answer it, but he's not here today, so perhaps we can provide a written response.
Yeah, that's fine. We just need to itemise that it has to be done regularly.
Sure, we'll make an action to record a response to that question.
And just on that, is it being cleared in the right direction? Like, they're saying after the last big storm we had, all the shingle and gravel come down the river, which caused a big bar out the front of the river, which made the waves crash into the lagoon. So are we clearing that river in the right direction? Maybe we should be going more to the Cape Way?
So,
Yeah, we'll ask the same question, we'll respond on both of those. So it's the frequency of clearance is the key one, and then the direction of the. Okay, thank you.
okay, brilliant. Okay, with that, I'll put the recommendation is just to receive the current coastal projects update. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Simpson, second by Councillor Dixon. It's going to be like you two are the only one in the room in the minutes. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, and our final paper before we do Giles' update is the update on follow-ups from previous meetings.
Thank you,
Nice.
Chair. Well, again, I'll keep it brief. These are either completed or a work in progress. I would just note again the action item 4 there. We're yet to supply Tamatea Pōkai Whenua with that compilation of records. It's quite a big job to pull it all together. So apologies, it's not done yet, but it has not been forgotten, and we'll prioritise that as soon as we can.
Okay, did anyone have any questions? Okay, it's just the recommendation is that we receive the update on follow-ups from previous meetings. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Harding, second by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, that's the final official paper, but we've got an update from Joe on the recent weather event.
Yeah, so that's the update that Giles will get.
Sharing my screen.
Okay.
Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Just make sure your mic's nice and close in there, Joe.
Yes, thank you. Right? Sorry. So this is an assessment of what we saw during this event from West Shore to Hamoana. So this is what we had was the wave forecast, an overview of the event. So in this line plot here, where's my cursor? Can you guys see my? Oh, anyway, on this line plot, you can see the swell developing from Tuesday to Wednesday, and we have highlighted here like the 3 most critical moments during this time, which would be when the high tides were coinciding with the swell peaking. And also we had some information on the water level elevation due to the wave activity. So these were the critical things that we were looking at. And also the other plot here on the right shows the swell entering on the whole bay. This is the peak of the swell, a screenshot of the peak of the swell. And due to its direction, like it really could penetrate into the bay and refract towards Cape Kidnappers. So there was little to none protection from these headlands. So things on, say, the statistical characteristics of the event. Basically, the swell wave height was slightly larger than a 1 in a 50-year event. These lines here show, like, this is a one-year event. Can you see the line? So the lower line, yellow line, is 1 in 1 year event. The orange line is a 5-year event, and the red line is a 50-year event. So it may sound alarming, but the difference between a 5-year event and a 50-year event is only 0.2 meters. Another thing that we should be aware of is that the statistics are based on wave simulations, which are not as reliable as the measurements that we can have from Port of Napier's wave buoy data. Unfortunately, the Port of Napier retrieved its wave buoys during the peak of the swell. So for now, we won't be able to estimate the statistical significance of the event. But we are interested into looking at its effects and gathering information for our records anyway.
Can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
The retrieving of the wave buoys, is
Yeah.
it something that's normally done before a big swell, or is that?
That was quite a surprise for me as well, and it's really annoying. Yes, because, I mean, I understand that the port has its own operation, you know, and since the swells are high and they know that they won't be operating, they can remove the buoys and reduce the risk of losing their assets. But on the long term, if they are designing a structure for the future, you know, if they're renovating the port or anything like that, they need this time series of extreme events for their own selves.
So it was removed on purpose
Yes.
to keep them safe from the big waves, right?
Yes, because during Cyclone Gabriel, their buoys were washed away, and they found it in Whirinaki or something like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Councillor Harding.
Maybe there's so much information in all of these slides, it'd be quite nice to ask questions as we go, if we have time.
Are you happy with that? Yep.
So, Joe, I'm just trying to understand. So, you already explained that this is synthetic data, as in it's not because we don't have a wave buoy at Hamwana.
Yes.
It's modelled.
Yes.
What reference, when you say wave height, where are you measuring that? I can't pick it up. So where exactly are you taking? Is that a generic average for the bay? Or?
No, this is at Hamwana.
Right. Okay.
We have specific points. When you see those numbers on the map, and you see Wairoa as well. Yep. So at each of these points, we can have information like this kind of forecast.
So, okay, so the next slide is at which point is actually at the beach crest there? Or
it's a zoom at this same forecast for Hamwana.
Right, not the offshore one, but actually on,
yes, close to the shore, yes. Yeah.
And would that sort of 1 in 50, is that influenced by the direction? So is this, do we infer, it's not speaking about whether it was a 1 in 50 year event generally out in the bay, but it's specifically how it was impacting that beach?
This statistic is calculated mostly based on the wave height. So it doesn't count for does not account for the wave direction. But if you consider that for Haumoana, the wave height will be always dependent on the direction, say if the swell has more of a southerly characteristic, it will just bypass Haumoana. So it indirectly accounts for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically we were looking at 3 critical moments here. on Tuesday at 8:15 p.m., where we have the peak of the swell and high tide. And then on Wednesday at 8:45 a.m., the swell was already receding, but the tide, and still we had high tide. And then on Wednesday at 9 and 7 p.m., still we would have the swell receding. But if we look at the last column, like the column most to the right, you have the wave height is a little bit smaller, but the tide is higher than the previous tide. So, you can have one thing compensating for the other, and still we would have over this 36 hours, all these critical points. And then we do have one wave buoy at West Shore, and we compare the forecasted model with the wave buoy data. So the blue line is the wave buoy data, and the red line is the forecasted significant wave height. So you can see that the swell was actually something around half a meter larger than the expected at West Shore. So we potentially this swell was underestimated at all the locations. And the peak of the swell was measured at 10:13 p.m. That was earlier than forecasted, like it was forecasted to peak around 3 a.m. of Wednesday, but still, at least it was 1 hour after the high tide, so it could be worse.
Councillor Harding?
Sorry, I'm sure other people have got questions as well. Joe, I have no idea how wave heights are forecast. We know from the Wairoa flooding, for instance, that the storm event was significantly larger than was forecast, particularly from a rainfall event. I'm trying to understand two things. One is what was the difference? Is it other forecasting data that's driving the difference between our modelled and the actual? So is that a consequence of Met Service data that's driving the swell based on some weather assumptions? First question. And the second question is historical data relevant? We know from a climate change point of view, we know that weather events are changing. Conceptually, is the same happening or likely to happen for swell conditions?
So starting with the first question, I'll have to get into how forecast model are developed. So basically, we have a few global institutions that do like sort of a coarse forecast for the whole Earth. And then what Met Service does is they get this coarse information and they refine it to the New Zealand area, right? Problem is, there are many observations that are used to feed these models so they can run the forecasts, and potentially around the Pacific, like the open Pacific area, there are not as many observations as we should to be able to really model these storms with the accuracy that we will need. So there will always be this gap between observations and models and things like that. So to me, it's hard to pinpoint where the flaw is. Maybe it's on the big picture of it, where the observations are being done, how the models, the physics of the models, how you tweak each thing, because they're really complicated. And like whenever we have the wind information, it's from the wind information that we can generate the waves. So if the winds are already not very reliable, the wave information will not be as reliable as well. So it's a really complicated thing. I'm not sure if I'm helping because I'm just putting,
I think what you pointed out is that it's primarily driven by the actual experience is primarily driven by the wind conditions.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's great. Yes. So my inference would be to my second question is if we're experiencing more wind or if more weather extremes,
yes,
then we're likely to have more instances of more extreme swell conditions.
Curiously, you just asked me a question which is about on my PhD thesis. Yes. It's difficult again. But basically, what is expected based on the most recent models of climate change is that the east coast of New Zealand will have less, the average wave height is projected to decrease. So we are supposed to have like less wave heights. But the storms make it more intense. So the time series, is the time series something useful? Well, I think it always is. Because also with the time series, you can see what is the trend of the data. So if we are seeing that the average wave height is reducing within our time series, okay, this means that our models are pointing to the right direction. And if we see that extreme events are also getting larger and larger, this is a good sign. But then, looking at the past, we can always infer whether we are looking at the right direction in the future. Because if we see that both wave heights are decreasing and extreme events are also decreasing, we can contest whatever we have in the models, question that. So yes, it is useful.
I think what you're saying is it's really complicated and hard to work out.
Sorry.
And it's not necessarily something that's within HBRC's control, the data gaps.
Yes.
Okay. And so it's more of a Pacific issue and a New Zealand issue than within HBRC's control.
Yeah, it's the nature of weather forecasting. In the end, you can't really predict.
A little
well.
bit.
Yeah.
A little bit science.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Chair, can I just highlight that the reason for these questions is that our responses, flood planning for inundation, is driven by forecasting. And we're increasingly getting this situation where the forecasting and the actual is out of line. And so that whole system the risk is, or one potential explanation for that, is that system is breaking down because our climate is changing. So it's really important that we understand how these modelling and forecasting assumptions actually build in to the plans that we're making for the community. So that's why it's really important to understand this stuff, because this modelling is driving what we're designing with the communities.
Yeah.
If the modelling is not working for us, then we have to factor the risk and precautionary approach into the decisions that we make.
Cool. Did you have a
Yeah,
question?
thank you, Chair. Joel, you've got there the wave height at the highest was 3.5 metres. As you moved around the coast towards Wairau, as an example, does that increase or does it decrease, the swell, size of the swell? As you move around the bay to the north, back around to the south, what variance do you get?
In general, that depends on the swell characteristics. So say around here, I would say Wairoa, the wave height is definitely going to be bigger than around here in West Shore and Haumoana, for example. You can see that the colors are slightly lighter on this. This means smaller wave heights. And Wairoa was really affected by these wave heights. Yeah, they just went full on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Corbyn?
Is what you're presenting challenging the basic assumptions of the strategy, coastal hazard strategy, or reinforcing them?
Sorry, what was that?
Is this information that you're presenting and the discrepancy between projected and actual challenging the basic assumptions that have been made in developing the coastal hazard strategy?
I wouldn't say that, because the events that Jose used were based on measurements. So say all of the calculations that he did for a 1 in 100 event or 150 years event, he did with actual data.
With actual data?
Yes,
Yeah.
measurements. But I understand what you're saying. Truth is, we do the best we have with the data we have. And there's no other way of doing it. There's no way we can just, So I mean, by no means I am confronting the strategy.
I think,
So just for clarity, you're saying that the assumptions in the strategy are still relevant, valid?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. The question I have is we have a demonstration here of wave height. My understanding is that in the coastal environment, the most significant impact is the wave period.
It's a mix. It's a
mix?
mix between wave height and wave period. The wave energy is calculated by squaring the wave height and multiplying it by the wave period.
Yep. And do the forecasts include period?
It does. I'm just simplifying things here.
I'm loving how detailed we're in the
I
engineering.
was thinking about you when I did this presentation, trust me.
Rightio. Shall we move on to the next slide?
All right. Okay, we've been through this one. Yeah, okay, and so the effects that we had was flood and overtopping around West Shore, erosion by the surf club, debris. By the time I was there the next day, I was during the high tide, so I could see some overtopping over the gravel bund as well.
I'll just pop
Sorry.
in there with a question. Just, we've seen high level the eco reef, and this is a bit of a mean question really actually, the amazing results it's had up in the Kapiti coast.
Yes.
If those results happen to be transferable to here, do you think that could have mitigated some of these effects?
I do think, but I am not the person deciding.
Yeah.
I'm just the one pointing the direction, and yeah, hopefully someone's listening to me.
Yeah. So it has the potential to have worked here. I won't know you
Say
to
it has the
anything
potential, yes.
professional. Yeah, okay. Cool.
And Ahuriri, which is a very well sheltered area, we still could see debris on the footpath. There was some erosion on that seawall as well. So Clive Grange Reserve, we can see the lowering of the gravel bund and lots of debris just pushed down the road, down the access road. Flooding in the campgrounds. For Haumoana, we had erosion and overtopping. I think that car was there, was buried around during the Gabriel event, right? It was buried and now it just showed up again. For Tiawanga, we see some erosion of the stop bank over close to the river mouth. Debris over the lagoon drain and next to the parking lot. I mean, whoever was in Tiawanga knows that there was a lot going on as well. At Clifton, debris around the access road for the campground. We can see a lot of debris on the corner of the entrance of the other campground. This photo on the left is the boat ramp of the boat club, and also some erosion on the other motor camp. And I was lucky, I was there a few days before and I took these pictures, so we can have some before and after pictures for comparison as well. So basically we can see that, the before pictures are on the left and the after are on the right. So basically I can see that the shingle crest was pushed towards the grass patch. More or less the same thing in Tiawanga, like all of the shingle was just pushed, what didn't erode. Haumoana, apparently we have like a lower beach level and the gravel building up near the walls. At the Tukituki River, the groin, we can see like most of the shingle was washed away because everything is on the parking lot. And here, same thing, it was pushed towards the lagoon. Yes, and there's a report underway. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for that. That's brilliant to get an update of the real-time coastal inundation. Has anyone got any other questions for Joe? No. Well, thank you very much.
Right, you're welcome.
That brings us to the end of our meeting. We do have a workshop following this, which we're going to look into the funding model and continue our work in that space. So we won't close with a karakia because we're going to carry on going. But what we will do, we'll quickly stop for a toilet break and a cup of tea. And the next meeting is public excluded. So I have to ask those to carry on.
Just before we close, I've been going over the minutes from previous meetings.
Yes.
I've been looking, but I was just wondering, is there still any discussion going on the revamping of the Harmwana pumps at the domain? Or was that being put on the back burner?
So councillor Harding might have an answer.
Yeah, look, from recollection, the paper alluded to it really briefly, but it's wrapped up. And so the short answer, yes. My understanding, slightly longer answer is we have our whole, the Hiratonga Plains Flood Protection Scheme review, which is going to come to us. So we've commissioned two big scheme reviews for Hawke's Bay. One is the Tukituki, another, or Upper Tukituki, another one is the Hiratonga Plains, and that flood protection, sorry, the flood plants are part of the Hiratonga Plains, so we expect that we'll get one integrated review that comes in, that will include recommendations for pumping for that, yep. But it's very much on the radar as its own issue, but it's embedded in that report, which I think is next month.
Brilliant. Okay. Oh, yes, Hannah?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I was just asked to extend a thank you to HBRC on behalf of the Homewana community for their efforts, and if they weren't there, we would have flooded. So there's a huge thank you, especially led by Kim and Marcel Huidonk. So.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, tea time. Cup of tea.